want to continue the discussion about the New York Times and the 1619 Redefine America thing. I cannot possibly overstate the importance of this. One thing that came out of this New York Times meeting a week ago today, and then an effort has been announced by the New York Times, they are going to start something called the 1619 Project. They're essentially saying they want to reframe how all Americans think about American history. No, they're not going back to the Constitution. They're not going to explain the Federalist Papers. They're not going to discuss the Declaration of Independence or the beauty of the structure of limited government set forth in the Constitution. No, what they are doing is positing the year 1619 as the real beginning of American history. And that 1619 year is being posited as that because these people want very, very much to have Americans think about race and racism all day long, 24/7, about every single topic. 1619, says the New York Times, is the first year that some Black slaves were brought to America on slave ships. So they want to say that's the real beginning of America, 1619, and they're pushing forward with the idea that all of America's history, everything we ever think about America and our history, must be reframed, recalibrated under the umbrella of looking at our country as a deeply, profoundly horrible, awful, racist place. That is the mission of the New York Times. They already launched their first effort on this. They've been saying they launched this effort saying essentially that the effort of reframing American history must involve talking about the Black slaves coming to America and what their history was here, but they go on from that. And I really want to, I just can't tell you how important this is. This is an effort to diminish the greatness, the uniqueness, the extraordinary, exceptional nature of the ideas that founded America, of the ideas that shaped America throughout our history. I am not claiming, and no one ever claims, that America was perfect from the time of our founding. But the founding ideas of America set forth in our Declaration of Independence and in our Constitution were the most extraordinary ideas upon which a nation has ever been based. Those ideas allowed America to develop into the most prosperous country, the most secure, the most safe, the most noble, the most generous, the most, just the best country there's ever been on earth. This is why people around the world who want to flee persecution, flee poverty, the country of choice is always America. What the New York Times is doing in the 1619 Project is trying to divert your attention from the great founding ideas of America and, in fact, instead pull you back into the slavery and to make the point, their point being that everything about America's history must be reframed, rethought in the context of thinking about racism and the beginning of slavery in our country. I will just give you a few examples. The entire edition of the Times Magazine began with an overview of race in this last week. And with the statement, our democracy's founding ideas were false when they were written. Black Americans have fought to make them true. Now, yes, obviously, when America was founded, we had slavery. No one's bragging about that. We as American people stood up. We had a civil war brought by many white Americans living in the North and Black Americans, some of them free, some of them slaves. People fought to end slavery in this country. Nobody else made them do that, but many, many Americans, Christian, moral Americans, realized you can't have slavery in a country where you had a country founded on the idea of the all men are created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain rights. We weren't perfect when we were founded. No one argues we were. Women couldn't vote when we were founded, but we as a country worked to make a more perfect union, make a better country. We went through the Civil War. We went through the civil rights movements. We went through ending segregation, all of which, by the way, were brought on by the Democrats. You have to understand your political history. It's the Democrat Party that tried to push slavery, the Democrat Party that instituted segregation in the South, the Democrat Party that pushed the Jim Crow laws, the Democrat Party that fought against the idea of the Civil Rights Acts. But that history is ignored by the New York Times because that doesn't fit into their narrative. But going forward, what they're trying to do with this 1619 Project is point out every aspect of policy in America must be seen through the lens of their racism argument. So, for example, they're going to have essays about the economy. But If you want to understand, this is one example of what they're going to be coming out with. If you want to understand the brutality of American capitalism, you have to start in the plantation. So now you have to see where you're going with. Capitalism is brutality. This is a very socialist left-wing effort by the New York Times, couched in terms of racism. So nobody dares disagree with them. Nobody dares mock them because, they're talking about racism and everybody says, well, I don't want to be someone they're going to accuse of racism, so I'll just be quiet. So they are equating capitalism and racism. You got to understand this. They're going after capitalism. They're going after free markets. Okay, then they say you also have to talk about the food we eat. The sugar that saturates the American diet has a barbaric history as the white gold that fueled slavery. Okay, yes, slavery did help. The institution of slavery was around as sugar was developed, and especially refined sugar as a product. So now in America, every time you use sugar, think about sugar in your diet or read about sugar in a recipe, you're supposed to be reminded that sugar came to America via slavery. And so again, you must be racist if you don't think about this all the time. I want to give you a few more because I really want to hit home on an important point. And then we're going to turn to something that AOC had to say about this. But they're trying to plant the seed in your mind and in the minds of Americans around this country that everything about America is permeated by racism, was created by racism, is defined by racism. This is a vicious attack on the goodness and greatness of the American culture of people of every race, ethnicity, background, national origin in this country. People are being painted by the New York Times as living in the most deeply racist country ever on the planet, and that everyone needs to feel terribly guilty about that. And they have to be willing to go along with all the left-wing solutions, such as, for example, reparations will be a big part of this. How can you look at this history? Friends, I'm obviously very worked up about this. I can't encourage you strong enough to realize this is a real, vicious, nasty, mean, hateful attack on America being launched by the New York Times under the guise of wanting to expose racism. What they really mean by that is cause you to agree with the left-wing view on every subject or else be accused of being racist. This is the mission of the New York Times and, frankly, many of the Democrat presidential candidates. One other thing, they talk about, this history of racism includes, what about our nation's physical health? Why doesn't the United States have universal health care? Again, they're pushing a socialist mission. They want socialized medicine, which, free market loving people, freedom loving Americans do not want, but they're pushing it under the guise of you must be a racist unless you agree with socialized medicine. Folks, it's impossible to overstate the significance of what they're trying to do. I'll read you one other little clip they have. America holds on to its undemocratic assumption from its founding that some people deserve more power than others. No, we don't. We try very, very hard to have as much fairness and equality of starting gate, give everybody, a fair chance in life, not equality of outcome, which is what New York Times is pushing. And the last one, they're even going to have, what does a traffic jam in Atlanta have to do with segregation? Trust me, there'll be some reason that America is a bad, 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 bad place. I want to hit one more piece, though, one more aspect of the story about this 1619 project. I do really encourage you to go to our website and to read the transcription of this meeting of the New York Times staff, because the executive editor, Dean Baquet, is B-A-Q-U-E-T. They had their town hall a week ago today. It was a very lengthy town hall, and he basically said, yeah, we tried really hard to get rid of Trump by getting the Russia-Trump collusion story going. Turns out, and he doesn't really concede that Trump-Russia collusion didn't happen. He concludes that Mueller didn't help us enough to uncover it. But anyway, the rest of the meeting is essentially apologizing for their failure to cover racism adequately. He goes on and on about the 1619 project and how we're going to really we're going to do everything we can to expose this country as a racist country from the founding up till today. Every issue you contemplate will be seen through this lens of racism. It's really, folks, this is the most insidious, ugly attack. It is designed to sway people in two ways. One is people who may be feeling vulnerable, people who are not yet experiencing success in the American dream, people who've had some, less than perfect experiences in their life, is trying to plant the seed of doubt in the minds of millions of Americans of color that any problem you have, any problem in your life, anything going on, is probably not really your fault. It's because of racism. It's hidden racism. It's racism by all these people in this country. It is designed to cause people to be suspicious toward, hateful toward, resentful toward their fellow Americans. It could not be uglier. And actually, as I won't read them all, but there are a bunch of questions from the staff, most of them essentially arguing more and more and more and more. Can't we say racism more and more? The New York Times is where it's not enough to say that they aren't journalists. That's clear that they are not journalists, but it's important to understand beyond being not journalists, these are people who have no interest in trying to report the truth, trying to understand what people, in fact, they talk about people who voted for Trump, and it's kind of the tone of they need to be educated to see, even if they think they're not racist, that if they like Trump, they are racist. This whole kind of given, they get to decide. They have decided for all of us that they think Trump is a racist, and so everybody else has to think that. And anyone who supports him must either be a racist or be stupid.